My name is Denise Feeney and I'm the Community Development Officer for the Galway County and Community Voluntary Forum. And I also teach part-time in the University in Community Development as well in Galway. I'm here today, I suppose, to talk about the importance of not doing it all by yourself, by working with the assets that are in your own community, and the advantages of working together as a group for your own common aim and goal, and how do you go about achieving that, and the importance of incorporating and including your community in achieving your goal. Just some background for yourselves to know about the community fora. There's a community and voluntary fora in every local authority in Ireland, and they were established by the Department of Heritage, Community and Local Government back in the year 2000. And the reason for their establishment is to be the voice for the community and voluntary sector. And it's through the community fora in each local authority that the community and voluntary reps have a voice on decision-making bodies. So it's the vehicle through which you get nominated onto your decision-making bodies, such as your strategic policy committees in your county councils, such as your heritage council committees in your county councils, on your, what was called county development boards. It's also through ourselves you get elected onto the partnership companies which administer leader funding. You get elected onto the childcare committees, the regional drugs task force, and so on. So it's vital, if you were a member of a community group, that you register with your community fora. And as I say, they're usually based under the community and enterprise unit of the county councils. So I think I would advise you to be the first thing you do if you're not registered already is to register with your community fora. Now, I know in Galway we have 650 community and voluntary groups registered, and there are a variety of different groups, from heritage groups, historical groups, resident associations, youth groups, active retirement groups, you name it. And we would send out emails out of that 650 groups. 99% of them will have email addresses. We do a re-registration every 2 years just to make sure they're accountable. An active group, so we don't have a database of inactive groups, so that's why we do re-registration every 2 years. And we would email them information out on a daily basis of various grants that are out there, or seminars that are out there, or conferences such as this that are out there. And we'd also link them into like-minded groups. So just say if it was a heritage group or a historical group in an area who wanted, for example, to go about setting up a pop-up exhibition, and we knew of another group who'd done it in County Galway, we would link them up to the similar group. So why reinvent the wheel? It's about learning from each other and not making the same mistakes. So it cuts a lot of corners out for yourselves as well. It saves a lot of time and money by linking and learning from each other. So, as I say, I would definitely encourage yourselves to become members of your community forums in your area. And as I say, it's through ourselves that you have a voice on the major decision-making bodies that make decisions that affect your lives. When you're working in a community, it's important to understand that there is different types of community out there. We're not all thrown into one type of community. There's such a thing as a geographic community. There's the social relationships of a group of people within a locality or arising from some form of collective action that form a community, and then there's the community of interest. Now, we all are part of this geographic community, and it's got to do with exactly geography, it's your location. And it's what you have in common with the people around you is that you all live in the same location. However, it doesn't mean that all living in a community will identify as a community. You might all feel represented. For example, if you're part of a residents association and you're in with a group just because you're living in the same housing estate, it doesn't mean that residents association does represent all your issues. For example, I'm sure a person with a disability wouldn't say that that residents association would be their voice. So just be aware of the different types of community. The second type of community that's out there is a community of common interest or common identity. And that's a community as a body of people having an experience, an interest or identification in common. And this type of community is not always linked to geography. And the examples are there would be your religious community, business community, the migrant community, the gay community, and so on. And I think for yourselves, it's this final community that you would find yourselves in under, because you have something in common. For example, if it's an issue or an aim you're hoping to create a pop-up exhibition or a museum in a vacant retail location, well, that's what you have in common. You come together as a result of some form of collective action, and you're identified as the social life of the area and the social interactions and the network of interrelationships established between people living in the same locality. But it does require active commitment on the part of its members. So for yourselves, that's under that community and the aims that you would fall under. There's many roles that a community has, and one key one would be, it's a mechanism for mobilising people. It's getting like-minded people together to focus on a common goal. And it's a form for the diffusion of information as well, that you exchange information among yourselves. And for targeting people who have the same interests as yourselves as well, or common goal. In some places, the community can be a form of provider for healthcare and other social services, and we'd see that a lot lately when communities are stepping in on behalf of the state and doing roles the state would have done in the past. I mean, a prime example would be the Meals and Wheels service that communities now provide. And also, of course, it's a mechanism for challenging policy, be it at regional level and national level. Other forms of community, features of community would be, of course, it's a sense of representatives. Again, you're with the like-minded people who you feel are representing your own views and ideas. Feelings of goodwill prevail usually in this community where you have like-minded people and are willing to cooperate with each other to achieve that common goal. Also an emphasis on what the group have in common rather than focusing on the differences as well. It's a main thing. It's important, of course, that your community or your group is not a closed shop. That you are amenable to change in terms of membership and structure, and that's vitally important. For people from the outside looking in, they need to understand that your community is not a closed community and that it's open to change, it's flexible to change, and they're amenable to new people coming in. It's dynamic and it's hard to define precisely. And it's a function of social contact. That is, the community exists through social contract and through yourselves meeting up to achieve that common aim. It's a self-generation concept which people come to see themselves as belonging to, and it's important that people feel belonging to a certain community. As I say, just because you live together in the same housing estate doesn't necessarily mean that you have the same issues and things in common. So when you come together as a group or a support group or a group to come together, for example, for a pop-up exhibition, at least you know that you are belonging to that group and you have the same aims. When you're working, I suppose, in developing a group or in a community, there's different forms of development. And I, as I say, as a community development worker, would work under the community development principles. But just to go back to the basics of, I suppose, understanding development in a community. Development concerns methods by which groups of people and organisations can move from an existing state of affairs to one which they consider to be more desirable at a given point in time. Development is associated with growth and progress and involves evolution and change, and is a process involving a conscious decision to bring about change, usually within the context of achieving a set of specific objectives and through the application of certain methods. So that's fine, that's development, but the question is how you go about achieving that development, and that's where your community development comes in. It's the process is as important as the outcome. And that's the challenges you have, I suppose, when it comes to development. It involves a balancing act between the expectations and the constraints of the physical resources available. You can work with what you have. The constraints of the social and cultural context, the interests and concerns of the people affected by the development process, and be clear that in the development process that the outcomes or changes expected may not reach expectations, or they may exceed expectations, or they may have unexpected effects. But when we're talking about development under the community development context, there's the main issues that arise there. There's 8 different principles that I'll talk about in a minute, but community development is most frequently directed at those who experience exclusion from society. So it's about bringing in the marginalised into the decision, and that's the importance between community development and development. It's that the people that the development is going to affect, or the change is going to affect, are incorporated in from the start in making the change. So it's not a top-down approach. It's not people from the outside coming in dictating to a community how things are going to change without consulting with the people living in that community themselves. And that's a major difference. It comprises a range of activities which seek to promote the principles of equality and justice, and it's about the process of community development must work to ensure that the communities themselves develop the skills, knowledge and the structures necessary to participate fully in the economic, cultural, political and social life of modern society. So if it is about coming together to set up a pop-up exhibition, it's about bringing the people and the people living in that community that is going to be affected by the exhibition or are going to be a part of it, so they're there from the very start, and it's not outsiders coming in dictating how it should be done, because you're never going to get buy-in if that's the case, and it's not going to be sustainable in the long run either if you don't get the buy-in from the people in the community too. So development and community development, there's way more advantages from working from the community development approach. It's longer, it takes longer, and it's more patience, but it's definitely more worthwhile in the long run. I suppose other differences between development and community development is that community development, as I said, is connected to social inclusion, but including those who are usually left out of the decision-making process. It's people who are socially excluded, are prevented from participating fully in society, and it seeks to work with and empower those people who are most marginalised and forgotten about, or maybe just don't have the confidence to join a group or to join in with a community. It's about empowering them to feel confident or to go through the necessary steps or training that's needed so that they can take part in a group. Because even it can be quite scary for a person just even to walk into a room and to sit in a meeting setting. So just be aware of the different barriers that people have when it comes to participation. And the key benchmarks of community development are the extent to which excluded groups participate and the degree to which empowerment occurs. So as I said earlier, it's about the process is as important as the outcome. So it's not just about outcomes and getting your museum set up or your pop-up exhibition. It's about how you went about and did that. Did you consult with the local people? Did you ask them to participate in the decision-making process and through all the meetings and so on? So the process itself is as important as the actual outcome. So why has community development come to the fore? Well, a lot got to do with we're now taking over, communities are taking over services that usually the state would have done in the past. The failure of the state or the market to solve problems at local level. Community development is now seen as a legitimate form for problem solving. It gives local people capacity to deliver and shape services and programmes on their own terms and not dictated by the top down. Cheaper for the state, of course, if all those volunteers are doing the work all the time. And just to be always conscious that not all community-based activity is community development. So even within your community groups, it mightn't be always they might be always working from a community development approach. So just be aware of that. In regards to how do you define community development? Well, I have a few definitions coming up, and you'll see the common words or phrases coming up in each of the definitions. Community development is a process, that's a word you're going to see coming up, whereby ordinary people improve their own communities by undertaking collective action. And that's another term that you'll see coming up quite often under principles of community development. And these kind of enterprises share concern to ensure first that ordinary people as residents or as members of high need groups get a better deal, and second that they bring this better deal about themselves, at least as far as possible. So they decide what to do, what needs to be done, but how to do it. So it's the people themselves in the community or in the group that are part of the decision-making process right from the start. Another definition from Cullen is that community development, again, is a process that it deliberately activates, encourages and supports groups of people to participate in collective action in pursuit of common interests, and which contributes to social justice and equity. So again, you have your word process coming up. It's about activation and encouraging and supporting groups to help themselves, working collectively, and of course under the principles of justice and equity. And the final term we have, and this comes from the Green Paper, support and voluntary activity. And again, it talks about community development involves people coming together in groups to identify their collective needs and to develop programs to meet their needs. The process or the way the work is carried out is as important as the program of development being undertaken. So process is as important as outcome. The process of community development stresses the need to develop community awareness, engender group cohesiveness, and promote self-reliance and again collective action. And this logically leads communities to seek change at policy and institutional level, often highlighting the needs of the redistribution of society's resources. So again, it's up to the communities themselves to decide how resources will be distributed. You saw a lot of common terms and words coming up there, and it does lead to long sustainability of projects if you do work under the community development principles. It is a long-term process, as I said, and that can be quite frustrating for a lot of people because they feel, oh God, we're never going to see the end of this. We just want to work on our museum. We just want to set up our exhibition. Can we not just get it to the end result quick? Why do we have to, handhold individuals or groups? That's the only way it's only going to be successful in the long run. You need to have the local people involved. You need to have the people who are going to be affected by whatever decisions you're making involved in order to get buy-in as well. And again, if you want to take it from, I suppose, just in regards from a funding point of view, a lot of funders will need to see that you did consult with the local community and they did participate in the process right throughout as well. But for yourselves, for the project to be successful in the long run, it's best to work with the community right from the very start. It provides an opportunity for groups and individuals to reflect on their own situation and identify and voice the changes required and participate in the change. So it's not just about bringing them together and doing a needs analysis or a community profile and saying, well, what are the needs in this community? You just don't leave them behind after that once they identify their needs. They have to be part of the process of solving and meeting the needs as well. So it's like if you're working with, for example, a lone parent and you ask, well, what are the needs of lone parents in a specific town? They have to be, as well as identifying what their needs are, they have to be empowered and have the confidence to help and meet their needs as well. So you're helping them to help themselves. So they're not relying on outsiders coming in. They're not relying on the community development worker, but they're helping themselves, and that will be more sustainable, the project as well, as a result. And they'll pass on their skills and expertise to their own colleagues. It provides an educational and motivational experience for participants, and as a result they should take control of their own lives, just what I said. And of course fosters active citizenship and grassroots democracy, which is vitally important in community development. The 8 principles and values of community development, if any one of them principles are missing in the project you're working on, it's not community development. So each one of them are as vital as each other. And I'll go through some of them in detail, but we have talked about them already. I'll give a test at the end to see you can remember all 8. The first one, as we said, it's about focusing on the development of both the individual and the community in order to bring about change. And that leads into the second one then, also about supporting and training for the individual and the community group. And that's vital. And what I mean by training, it could be your management skills training. How to be an officer, be it a chairperson, secretary, treasurer, the basics. How to put together a constitution. How to run a productive meeting. How to run an AGM. how to fundraise, how to apply for grants. Basic training can be done. And again, that's where your local community development worker comes in, be it from your community fora or your community enterprise unit in the local authority. A lot of the partnership companies of community development workers. The VEC would provide training in this area. You apply for a grant to the VEC and they'll provide a tutor to help with the necessary training that you've identified. Examples of collective action, as we said, would be your fundraising for an action in fundraising or lobbying on an issue. And it's about also you may need help in regards to doing a needs analysis, doing a community profile, evaluating a project, monitoring a project to see is it going well, so that maybe you can make changes before it's too late. The second vital principle of community development is participation. So without participation, community development definitely cannot happen. And that's where the local people themselves are consulted and participation in whatever group has been set up in the area. And the local people know best what they need and how to administer it effectively, so they are your richest asset, is the local people themselves. And they will save you a lot of time and money. Local people know the environment around them and how to work well in an area, so they might know the history of an area. If you plan to set up an exhibition or a museum in a certain area, they'll say, no, there's history to that area, or there's not, maybe that's not the right location, or they might know what skills or expertise are in an area, what people in the community have different skills that can help you, which would save money in the long run. I always advise community groups when they're setting up a community group, try always to have an accountant, and as one of your volunteers, try also maybe have a solicitor, just to look at the expertise that are around your table, so you don't have to buy in these expertise and cost your group more money. State intervention in development projects can create dependency and negate the capacity of the people to solve their own problems. We found that a lot when the country was flourishing with money. Everyone was applying for funding, but then when the funding ran out, usually the projects died as a result. They never thought about the long-term sustainability. Also, programs that depend on external sources of expertise rather than empowering the local people can fall once the expertise is withdrawn. And again, don't be dependent on maybe the one person in your committee. Maybe your chairperson is the only one who knows how to apply for funding. And what about if they step down? What happens there? Maybe you're depending a lot on maybe a local authority worker or some community development worker, and then they lose their job, they're gone. Does that mean your group falls flat? So just be aware all the time of trying to make your group more sustainable yourselves, and keep, I suppose, empowering yourselves and educating yourselves to be sustainable in the long run on your own and not to be dependent on others. External developers often don't know the area or the social structures of environmental factors which affect the area adequately enough to initiate programs without making costly mistakes. So that's where your local people, their skills, their knowledge, their expertise is so important. And that's why they have to be consulted. Leading on to consultation, well, that's, as it says, consult with people so that they are part of the decision-making process and the actions involved. So they identify what the needs are, but also they are part of the process of deciding how they're going to meet their needs. This principle, a lot of times, can be hijacked, and it can be seen as tokenism. A lot of outside external sources come in and say, oh yeah, we had a workshop there one evening, and we hired a room, and yeah, we did consult with them. We ticked the box, that's that gone. But they didn't really listen or take on board what the people had to say. It was just tokenism, and that can be very frustrating for local people, and we've seen that over and over again. And you lose local people's trust, and it's very hard to regain that again. So if you are doing a questionnaire, you are doing a survey, doing a needs analysis, don't just leave the results to one side and follow your own route that you were planning to go anyway, because you've lost people straight away, and it's going to be very hard to gain their trust. The fourth principle, empowerment. And that community development process must result in some level of empowerment for both the individual involved and the community as a whole. So again, it's back to your empowering maybe through training or different courses that the group themselves or individuals need to do to better themselves. Disempowerment of communities allows social exclusion to continue, and that's what we're trying to combat. We're trying to combat social exclusion, so we are including those who usually are most marginalised. In order to do that, you have to work with them sometimes on a one-to-one basis, so that empowering them and building up their confidence to help themselves. Work with participants in an empowering manner to bring about positive change for the participant, where change is the result of informed choice, so that they make the decision of what I suppose are the solutions to their needs by being informed or educated on different issues. Fifth principle is equality, which we talked about before, and that's about maintaining the commitment to the principle of equality. It's about the community development aims to challenge the attitudes, the practices of both the individual and the institutions in society which marginalise and discriminate against other groups. So it's about challenging attitudes and behaviours. Equality is not a process for making everyone the same as, but instead it's a principle concerned with having access, opportunities and resources equal to everyone else within the society. So people have basic rights. And that leads on, of course, to justice. It's about encouraging and engaging in initiatives which promote the economic development of each community and opportunities for employment and individual economic advancement within communities. It's about upholding and respecting the rights of an individual and their community, providing resources and opportunities for citizens to be participating members of their own communities and local government. And again, that's where your community fora come into play. That we make sure you have a say on local government structures and other decision-making processes, and the community and voluntary sector have a voice, and it's not just local authority officials or county councillors sitting around the table making decisions on our behalf, that the community and voluntary sector are sitting around that table too. Also, to guarantee fair and equal access to services and facilities, to uphold the right to basic support, adequate to provide for a minimum level of individual welfare, and to recognise and value different identities and practices and values within communities. And as I said before, when we talked about the 3 different types of communities, we all are part of different communities, but we all have different identities and practices, but we have a right to have our voices heard, no matter what community we fall in under. The 7th principle, and that's where we work with others to achieve common goals collectively, and that's central to the thinking behind community development, that each partner has an equal and important contribution to make and should be facilitated to do so. So every member of the community has a right to be part of the group, and again, as I said earlier, that no group is seen as a closed shop, open membership. And the 8th one, as we talked about earlier, the importance of the process itself, of how you develop a group or develop a project, is as important as the outcome itself. So that you're ensuring a balance between the need to achieve your goals and maintaining a commitment to the development and education of the individual and community to ensure effective community development. And this balance between process and outcome can only be achieved if the education or learning is combined with the achievement of the tasks. It does slow down the process. If you feel your group, you're constantly dragging them along to get to the next stage, but it is worth it in the long run if you bring your group along and you're not losing people. And I'd say to people have different needs, different education needs, different training courses, as I say. At least if you're in part of the community forum, you can link up with other like-minded groups who have achieved what you're hoping to achieve, so you can sit down and talk to them, so you're cutting corners, you're not reinventing the wheel, and you're learning from each other. And it does save a lot of time and energy. And I suppose that's where ourselves as community development workers come in to help yourselves as groups out, that you don't feel isolated and left on your own as a community group. And the role of community development workers is to build good relationships with committees and organisations, to encourage people to work with and learn from each other, facilitate and encourage consultation, as well as the other 7 principles, and to develop new community groups, committees and organisations to meet whatever needs are out there. Work with people and communities to plan for change and take collective action. Work with the people to develop their frameworks for evaluation, maybe going back over a project and see where it went wrong. What are the successes of that project? Where it went wrong? How can we learn from the next? And that's why it's vitally important to reflect on and develop your own practice as well, and that you as a group learn. Not to be dependent on always the professional maybe to come from the outside in to help yourselves, that you have as much part to play, and it's no one coming in maybe dictating how we as a group should run yourselves. There's a lot of benefits from working from the community development approach, and of course the obvious would be that you are recognising that people are excluded from decision making process, and it's not just people who are marginalised communities. They're more and often naturally excluded for a variety of reasons. It could be from even barriers to participating in a group, be it down to transport, it could be down to access to a meeting, it could be down to maybe having a disability, can't get to the meeting, it can be down to literacy problems, they couldn't read about the flyer or the information about the meeting that was coming up. So there's so many different barriers that people have that would like to participate in a certain group or a project, but you have to think of what are the barriers to their participation, and that's getting down to a deeper level. But just don't assume, I suppose, that everyone has access all the time to participation. It's about an opportunity to give voice to the most excluded, recognise interdependence of a range of issues. Effective community development builds productive partnerships, and in a lot of cases when you work successfully in a group, a subgroup of that group might lead on to working on another project together also. And of course the economic value of community activity. It generates employment, local enterprise, strengthens, I suppose, the community as well, and delivers services, and that's vital, I think, when it comes to the theme we're talking about here today. When you talk about your museum or your pop-up exhibition, definitely falls under providing a very worthwhile economic value to a community. In regards to, we talked about before, the assets in the community, they're around us, but we mightn't always be aware of it. The individual themselves, major asset to the community, and usually can be forgotten about. As I said, look what the expertise an individual can bring to your group, and could save you a lot of time and money in the long run. Be it someone with a professional background, or even someone who lived in the community all their lives, so they know about the history of an area. They know maybe where there is an outlet available who's in a great location. They know the owner, the landlord, and maybe would give it at a great price, but maybe it's up to them themselves to approach that landlord, because it might be an old family friend, more so than an outsider coming in approaching that landlord. It's just about thinking outside the box. Again, an asset is a building or a place. A local business themselves, sponsorship, working with the employees in an area to help you, in that business to help you out, do a fundraiser. And of course the community itself. Group assets first, then the individual. So just think of all the assets that are around you that won't cost you, and that could be about stepping back and thinking outside the box before you go hell for leather into working on a project. Think, have you the right people around the table? Have you all the vital components in that meeting, in that room first before you move on? So groups and communities working together, I suppose there's a lot of reasons why you should work together. Obviously the main thing is that it's about sharing information, expertise, resources and knowledge in an attempt to overcome challenges and barriers. And the process of individuals and groups coming together for a common purpose or a mutual benefit is vital as well. But just be aware, I suppose, and I know Liam was talking about earlier on, there is a lot of, I suppose, barriers to groups working together, the different personality clashes, and just be aware that that's just the norm. And there is the 5 stages of group development that a group has to go through, and you might have all heard of it before, and it's the forming and the storming, the norming and performing and adjourning stages of a group. So you could feel you're going 10 steps forward and then 5 steps back in the next meeting when another conflict or fight breaks out between 2 personalities and so on. But that's the norm. You're dealing with personalities, and we're not going to be able to change that. And I suppose just be aware of the different stages. Of course, the forming one is when the group members have this desire, you're coming in with all enthusiasm to be accepted by the group, and you're all singing from the same hymn sheet, but you're all shy to say things at the very start. Maybe you're wondering, well, who's going to be the leader? That person, I think, is quite dominant. They're looking to be the facilitator or the chairperson here, but you don't want to say anything, you don't want to rock the boat. And then, of course, you'd be storming. Then you'd be kind of, as a group, you'd be tempted to organise the task, and conflict will be probably inevitable at this stage, because there'll be different personality clashes be coming out at this stage. I suppose there'll be questions arise over the structure of the project or the group itself. Who will lead us? Discomfort may cause some members to remain silent while others dominate. I think you all are familiar with this type of group. And then you go on to the norming stage, and that's maybe where the interpersonal relations are characterised by cohesion. You'll be gradually willing to change, and your maybe preconceived ideas or opinions will change over a while. You get to know each other. Maybe leadership is shared. Creativity can be quite high as well at this stage. And you know, you're brainstorming quite a lot, and you're feeling quite good about being part of this group. And you're performing. Then you're starting to perform, and you're reaching your goals. And maybe some groups are working independently, working on maybe a fundraising, and another group are looking at applying for grants. So you're working together as a group quite well at this stage when you're performing. And you're highly task orientated and working as a unit. But then, of course, it comes to the stage then you're adjourning, and that's a natural stage as well, when you were successful or not successful in your project. And it's about terminating the group at this stage. And a lot of people have quite a lot of apprehension at this stage because they don't want a group to terminate. But as I said, if a group has been successful and you gelled well as a group, there's a likelihood you'll stick together and maybe work on another project together. But just, I suppose, where I'm coming from with regards to stages, there's always going to be different stages to a group that you're going to go through, and you're going to go forward 10 steps and back 20 steps every so often. It can be quite frustrating. But if you keep thinking of the principles of community development, the 8 principles I talked about, you realise that it is most important to bring, to work under them principles to achieve the outcome, more so than you're just wanting to see an outcome for the sake of an outcome. You know, you talk about your group leaders, I suppose I consider are the very important roles of your facilitator or your chairperson, and the bottom one is probably the most important, and that people are listened to, and even that would mean the quiet person in the room who doesn't say anything, that they constantly are invited to talk. So I suppose we'll finish up by saying, well, what are the advantages of working together as a group? And that's why you want to know, well, what are the advantages of working with a community, besides doing it yourself? Well, better commitment and buy-in, that's the obvious. When people have had a part to play in making a decision or creating a project, they're more likely it's going to be sustainable, and the people themselves will stick with you because they've built up a trust and relationship with yourselves. The local knowledge, of course, is another one. I'll go past that. Local knowledge was a big one as well. And just to be aware that, you know, you have a better chance of more courageous decisions being made as a group when you know that the local community are involved in that decision themselves, and more so than outsiders coming in dictating what needs to be done. Higher productivity, working together with others on a particular task can act as a stimulant to greater output, and of course the main one I talked about is the whole area of sustainability. And that's what we're all aiming to. We're aiming to bring together a group of the fit, appointed by the willing, to do the necessary for the grateful. And that's what you're all is the common aim at the very end. And it is through the principles of community development you will achieve that aim.